Yes, I. Greetings to the mighty name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie the First. You see, don't know. Big respect to our subscriber. See, both the old and the new. You see. Now, well, a long time I have a channel, but I recently started dealing with it on a regular basis. You see, since this lockdown thing has started. See, so narrative them is not aimed at any particular political party. See, we know politics so far has been failing the people in worldwide, regardless. You see it. So, you feel yourself if you hear me talk about the party or the individual, the current leader at the moment who is feeling like any other leader or most other leader across the world. See? Don't feel like a take side against your party with another party. Don't be stupid, go watch other videos in our channel and things like that. See? Because I saw the thing said. We're not a politician. You see, we will speak it like it is, especially when it comes to history. History is already lagged and can't change. We can't change it, so I have to just say it like it is. You see, now, as I say, lagged. Here's a lag of history. See? Look closely. See? Now, what happened is, I start read a book here, probably a month ago, and me have to stop because we realized that some of what I did read was omitted or redacted. See? I never want to continue along the line there and cast on. You know? Now that book here, it piqued my interest because it was banned. Banned by the Labour government from the Jamaica public. I wouldn't say Labour government, when I said Jamaica government, because I don't think the ban was lifted after the PNP came to power either. You see, and I'm still thinking this book is banned. So I'm gonna read again from the first chapter. We are the first chapter, you know. We did read the introduction to the item already. No, we are the first chapter. We are going to read from the first chapter now. You see, now this book is a view from the eye of a foreigner in regards to where Jamaica, somebody will come to Jamaica, a scholar who come to study in Jamaica and observe how the workings of Jamaican political thing go. You see it, and give for them views. See, independently, I hope. See, so, I'm going to read from the book Born for Dead by Larry Guns. See? Alright, chapter 1, from Babylon to Brooklyn. The 5 men from the Rankers Posse carried baseball bats, flashlights, and a set of chains into the basement of the derelict building on Pacific Street in Brooklyn. It was just before Christmas 1986, and the basement was cold, dark, and empty except for a boiler. The men were bundled in hooded sweatshirts and the triple fat goose down trench coat that were then the rigor for crack dealers who had to spend long nights on freezing streets. They would go home later after tonight's mission was accomplished to change into silk and linen for the dance at Love People 1, the Rankers' favorite disco on Empire Boulevard. The youth they had come to discipline cowered in the corner by the boiler, already pleading for his life. At 17, Norman Alwood was the Rankers' youngest soldier, an African-American Yankee boy among Jamaicans. He had been nothing but a liability to Delroy Uzi Edwards, the Rankers' Don, chronically shorting Edwards on money and stealing crack from the Rankers' stash. A few weeks before this night, Alwood had failed to deliver $400 he owed, and Uzi shot him in the leg. A favorite punishment as a warning. Alwood did hid from him after that, getting down out of sight on the floor of the apartment he shared with his sister Janet when Delroy cruised the street in his black Mercedes Benz. But now, the kid's luck had run out. Dane Trail, one of Delroy's cousins, held a gun on Norman Alwood while he begged for mercy. Trail had a reputation as an enthusiastic disciplinarian, a soldier loyal to his Don, but he too would die soon in an unsuccessful Rankers bid to take over a rival posse crack spot in Brooklyn. Conroy Green, a soft-spoken, bi-spectacled gang member, was down in the basement with his fellow posse troops. The memory of Alwood's terror that night would come back to haunt him, along with remorse for his own cowardice. The kid kept crying, "Dane, help me. You know better than to think I would steal." And Dane was just looking at him, blank, like, "You're not talking to me." So I figured if he knew this kid this well and he's just going to let them do that to him, what do I look like? What do I look like talking up for him? So I kept my mouth shut. I had to tie him up. Well, I knew it was wrong. I felt wrong, really and truly. I thought they was just going to give him a little beating, a spanking. This was the first time I saw Delroy and them discipline somebody. I didn't know they were going to end up killing the guy. They didn't know. He just died on them while they were trying to get information from him. Delroy Edwards stood off to one side, watching. He was in his late 20s then, a handsome man whose eyes had already acquired the faraway, effectless gaze of someone used to killing. Short and stocky was a body bulk up from lifting weights. Delroy had earned his nickname from the gun he favored and his reputation from his days as a mercenary in Kingston. On the crumbling, bullet-packed concrete walls of Southside, the war-torn ghetto where the Rankers Posse was born, Uzi's name was scrawled in green, the color of the Jamaican Labour Party. It was the JP that had given him his first job as a Southside Rankers. The party hired him for a pricely $10 a week during the 1980 election campaign to shoot the PNP out of Southside, part of the neighborhood that was Michael Manley's own constituency. When I met Delroy a few years later in the maximum security visiting room of Rikers Island, he told me how he had picked his posse's name. "It means stinky," he said with a puckish grin. "It's like the smell when you piss against a wall." But Delroy was still just a friar then, a young chicken in Kingston's posse parlance. Even after he'd killed a few people in Southside, he was a minor soldier in the political wars. And once the election was over, he was nothing but a petty criminal with the police breathing hard down his neck. So he came up to Brooklyn and regrouped the Rankers with a ragtag assortment of old friends from the Southside streets and American homeboys like Norman Alwood. He rode the crest of the crack wave, acquiring a dozen booming drug spots, a fleet of new cars, and an arsenal of fine guns. The Rankers cleared as much as $50,000 on a good day, with special 2 vials for the price of 1 deals on busy Saturday nights and holidays. But their violence was so extreme that the police eventually took them down. Delroy and his minion killed 6 people and wounded 17. Now it was Norman Alwood's turn to feel Delroy's wrath. They say it took more than heart to beat someone than to stab or shoot them, said Conroy Green, moosing about why Delroy chose to discipline Alwood the way he did. I guess it's easier to pull the trigger of a gun. So they lit into the youth and beat him unconscious. When he came to and began to whimper and wreathe, Kenneth Manning got vexed. Manning was in his 50s, the oldest man in the posse and a relative of Delroy's uncle from Kingston. He walked over to the boiler for some scalding water and poured it all over Alwood. Manning was kind of, laughing, Conroy Green recalled. The kid's skin started to strip and he started moving again, Kenneth said. Oh, you're not dead yet. He was laughing at him. After that, we left him hanging, chained to a beam. He died sometime during the night. The men drew straws to see who would dispose of the body. Jamaicans are intensely suspicious about being around the dead. Delroy ordered them to dump the corpse in a section of East New York that belonged to a rival posse called the 40s. This gang hailed from a PNP neighborhood in East Kingston named Rockford, and the 40s was then waging a war over drug turf in Brooklyn with the Rankers. Island politics added an extra vicious kick to their Brooklyn vendetta. Delroy wanted to make it look like a 40s killing, Conroy said. So he wanted us to shoot the body since he said that otherwise cops and Jamaicans would know the Rankers did it. We had the reputation for beating people. A sanitation worker found Alwood's remains in a dumpster. 3 months later, the corpse was frozen solid and difficult to identify after the mutilation done by the Rankers. But Janet Alwood knew it was her younger brother. She had been waiting through the winter for his body to be found. It was not until the spring of 1987 that police from Brooklyn North Homicide were finally able to arrest Edward on a gun charge that stuck. They had been dogging him since 1982 when he was charged with slaying the only witness to his father's murder. He was acquitted, but the police and most of the Jamaican community thought Uzi himself had killed his father. Eager to take over the ganja business that Lloyd Edwards had going in his little grocery store in Crown Heights. In the summer of 1989, Delroy was tried on multiple charges of murder, assault, and conspiracy to distribute cocaine. It was a federal trial, the first successful prosecution of a Jamaican posse leader under the Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organization RICO statute. It took a team of more than 20 federal agents and New York police to finally get Edwards off the streets. And when the jury found him guilty on all 42 counts of the indictment, the prosecution team held an impromptu celebration. A few months later, he was sentenced to 501 years without parole and given a fine of over 1 million. None of this had any impact whatsoever on the street in Crown Heights, except to open up Delroy's former turf there to a host of competing dealers. Conroy Green and a dozen other Rankers men went to prison for much shorter sentences. All of them had cooperated with the prosecutors. Green had been their star witness, so they placed him in the Federal Witness Protection Program. And when he comes out, he will be given a new name. He has been a model prisoner, and when I went to visit him shortly after the trial, the guards let us alone for the afternoon. We sat in an orange carpeted room with vending machines and no bars on the windows, with the sound of bird songs floating in. It was sweet but mournful background music to our voices. Conroy looked studious that day with his rimless glasses, and he chose his words with care. He called me sis, a Jamaican term of endearment. I was one of the few people who accepted his collect card from prison in empty months after the trial. Conroy still had a few robbery charges pending, so he refrained from talking about those cases, but he was open and articulate about things he had done with Delroy Edwards and what it had been like to grow up in the rough Dunkirk neighborhood in Kingston and then come to America as a teenager. Dunkirk is a PNP zone in downtown Kingston, and it was already a hotbed of gang warfare by the time Conroy was growing up. His parents were hardworking people who tried to steer clear of the violence. His father drove a bus between Kingston and the countryside, and when some of his passengers gave him pound weights of ganja from their cultivations, he would give these to the Dunkirk gangs to sell. Conroy thought this was what gave him and his family cool runnings, good standings in the neighborhood. But the tribal warfare intensified so terribly in the late 70s that his parents left Jamaica for good and moved to Albany, New York. Shortly after the bloody 1980 election, Conroy came up to join them, and in the summer of 1986 he went to Brooklyn to visit a cousin. There he met Delroy Edwards, who was just beginning his brief run with glory. I just saw this young guy with all these people around him, Conroy recalled, and I thought maybe I could get into this too. I told myself, it can't be all that bad. Uzi talked that first night I met him about the drug game, how he survived, being in shootouts and keeping from getting arrested. And he talked a lot about Southside, how the politician didn't even give them guns at first. The first gun the Rankers had down there was a one-pop they made out of bicycle handlebars, the curvy kind. You cut them where they curve so it's shaped like a gun. Then you load a spring on it with a nail and put a bullet in. Delroy said they fought off the Tel Aviv Posse, which was PNP, with that one pop until they started getting guns from the JLP. 2 little 38s, he said. 2 little 38s. He said everybody wanted them and they caused a lot of cutthroat. Who had those guns ruled? Conroy started working for Delroy soon after that summer night. Drawn to the Don by the promise of money and respect, both men had been on intimate terms with violence since their youthful days in Kingston, and both knew that being affiliated with a violent political posse from Kingston could only enhance their standings among Jamaicans on the streets of New York. Conroy understood the 1980 election as a watershed for the posses, the time when young men like Delroy Edwards made a name for themselves. Being a youth down there during that time, the killing was like a natural thing. Conroy and I talked mostly that day about violence in one shape or another. The reality of killing as opposed to the cinematic version of it that he and his crew had grown up with. The evanescent way that Kingston's familiar mercilessness meshed with the Hollywood imagery his friends cut their teeth on as youth. He thought that even though the movies didn't necessarily engender the violence, they framed it, they gave it style. To an outsider, it might look like, damn, these guys are mean. But being from Jamaica, you see it growing up. You see it all your life. Even before I killed somebody, I felt like I killed before. I think maybe Hollywood had a part in the rude boy thing with the movies they put out, like certain westerns. Jamaicans act out a lot of that stuff. Want to be tough, like outlaws, even Delroy. Every day I would shoot somebody. We would say, hey, you just got another notch on your gun. When I shot at people, I felt like I did it before. It wasn't like I was trembling and asking, what is this I'm doing? It was like I was into it all along. And I think that's just from social settings, from growing up around all that violence, the way Jamaica was with politics. This way it was when I was just a youth. The way it was when I was just a youth coming up. It is just after Labor Day 1992. I am sitting in a small room at the downtown Manhattan headquarters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation with an agent, Bob Chacon. He is setting up a VCR so that we can watch a videotape seized by the FBI in December 1990 when police and federal agents raided the Brooklyn headquarters of a posse called the Gully. You're not going to believe this thing, Chacon said. It's really amazing. The videotape was part of the Gully's archival stash, home movies of high times like posse dances and annual West Indian Labor Day parade down Brooklyn's Eastern Parkway. But the video Chacon wants me to see was made in Kingston during one of the last streets that the Gully put on for the sufferers at home. These streets were held every Easter, a season of great celebration in Jamaica. In days of slavery, Easter, like Christmas, was a time when masters might give their slaves a new article of clothing or a tiny ration of meat. Now the Gully Posse's Don Eric Chinaman Vassall was continuing this tradition with Yo, forgive me that. I hear that thing that. Nah, liar. We was continuing this tradition with funds derived from cocaine and heroin instead of sugar and rum. Eric Vassall started out as a petty thief in Magura Gully, a tight-knitted ghetto settlement in eastern Kingston that is fiercely loyal to the People's National Party. He migrated to Brooklyn in 1981 and began selling first ganja and then powdered cocaine. Soon he was the only Jamaican posse leader to branch out into heroin, and this turned out to be a brilliant entrepreneurial move. After the New York police initiated Operation Pressure Point to drive heroin dealers out of Manhattan's Lower East Side, Vassall reaped a whirlwind of profits from the brisk smack business on his side of the East River, and he shared his luck with the people back home. Vassall had a string of colorful aliases, including Chinaman, because of his half-Chinese ancestry, and Brooklyn Barry for his standing in the borough. He liked to give his heroin catchy names to like Obsession and No Way Out. His posse troop started calling him the IRS because of his habits of taxing them for funds to buy VCRs, Walkmans, tape decks, shoes, clothing, foods, and guns for the eastern treats in Magura Gully. They were the only bright spot in many of Gully sufferers' bleak year, the time when a school child will get new shoes or a posse member's baby mother, the mother of his child, receives some clothing and money for his child. The guns that Vassall sent down were another matter. He called them vote getters. They ensured that the violence tearing the Gully apart would only escalate. And they ensured that the violence tearing the Gully apart would only escalate. And they ensured that the violence tearing Gully apart would only escalate. But that was just another of the contradiction inherent in the posse system and it was momentarily obscured by the joyous partying that went on around the streets. The scene Bob Shannon cues up on the video is a beauty pageant for preteen girls, filmed by Vassall, Eric's brother and public relations man. Krat had panned his camera out over the packed, clearly night crowd on the Gully's soccer field and then closed in on the stage where the girls paraded in their best dresses. Some wore frilly, ruffled pastel concoctions that reminded me of white First Communion dresses. And other contestants were decked out in slinky polyester, but each one was wearing a satin sash across her budding breasts, inscribed with the name of whichever posse soldier had sponsored her. There was Miss Shan, Miss Juki, Miss Everreds. Shannon is visibly rattled by the girls. Shakan is visibly rattled by the girls' prepubescent sexual vibe. And I do recognize that unsettling mixture of innocence and vampishness that lets you know how mercilessly short their childhoods are going to be. Meanwhile, Whitney Houston's voice throbbed over the sound system, proclaiming that no one can take away her dignity. The next tune is a soul version of Bob Dylan's Knocking on Heaven's Doors. This is it's ballad for a gunfighter. Shakan and I shake our heads at the aptness of the song. He points to the girl with the sash that says Miss Juki and tells me that Juki himself wasn't long for this world by this time. Just after the treat, he was blown away by a rival dealer as he stood at a payphone in Brooklyn. Just before the winning beauty queen is announced, a little girl stepped up to the microphone with a prepared speech of gratitude for Eric Vassall, even though he is far away in Brooklyn too. We can remember the first day we had this treat like it was yesterday, she trilled. This is the 5th year since Barry and this Shenak to the crew. She had a hard time with the unfamiliar word. The Brooklyn street where the Gully Posse was based and the mistress of ceremonies has to pronounce it for her. From the United States of America have shown their love and care for us citizens of McGregor settlement. We are grateful for this kind of togetherness, and we pray that this will never cease. The Shenak to the crew, the Shenak to the crew. Words cannot say how much we love and care for you. Barry, you are extremely loving and caring, and that's what makes you one in a million. Shakan has his own idea about what makes Vassall one in a million. Like the other federal agents and New York police officers who staged the 1990 raid on the Gully's headquarters, he is still smarting over the fact that Vassall slipped through the dragnet and got away. Shakan knows that Vassall is back in Jamaica, almost certainly in McGregor Gully, protected by the PNP and the sufferers who worship him. And Shakan knows what happened to some of the 42 other Gullymen who were not so lucky and were picked up in the raid. One of them was a young man named Anthony Williams who got the nickname Modeler because he loved stylish clothes. Shakan was the one who cut Modeler down from the bar in his cell where he had hanged himself. He was a sensitive religious kid, Shakan said, and he felt betrayed by the whole situation. He had no money. He was living day to day, friendless. Vassall deserted him and he knew it. So he pleaded guilty in the case, promised to cooperate, but he got into a fight in Manhattan Correctional and they put him in solitary. That was too much. He read his Bible, wrote a farewell letter that reeked of remorse to his mother and sister in Jamaica. Then he left the Bible open to a passage about mercy and forgiveness and hanged himself. He was a sweet kid, always smiling in the pictures of him we found from before the Gully days. When the tapes finished, Chakan turned to me with a tired smile. I noticed for the first time that his blue polo shirt has Jamaica embroidered near the collar, a souvenir from one of his working trip to the island. I asked him if he'd ever go there for a pleasure. Not on your life, he says. I asked him if he thinks Eric Vassall might be arrested in Kingston and extradited to stand trial in New York. He says, this is pretty doubtful. When you see how dons like Chinaman are loved by the people in Kingston, you understand why they are untouchable. No one down there is going to cooperate with us, and to get them extradited, they are safe, totally safe. Yeah, you know, see it. It's a part one that Rasta, and you know, I hope the sound and everything is alright, and the item can hear what I go on, cause you know the day. You don't know, you know. You see this onion here. The onion here have some layers where Jamaica need to hear and watch. You know, see it. So first we talk about Chinaman and Delroy Uzi. You know, see it. This lady is like she a scope cross Kingston. I come from East, I go West. You know, see it. But I have an insight and some idea upon what really are going on inside of the book here already. Very exciting, informative, and revealing. You know, see it. You know, see it, you know, it's very endearing, you know, see it, I'm pleased, I'm proud of it, so far, I man can relate to most of the experience, I mean, you know, see it, so, you know, the next reading will be chapter 2, which is groundation, you see what I say, and we take it from there, so, and see where we are going with it, so, we just talk about Delroy Uzi and Chinaman and the Gully Posse, Delroy Uzi and the Rankers Posse, see? More bless. Give thanks. Share, like, and subscribe, and I open a light that one there. You know, see it. And I will it more for come. So the book here, I buy it so that you can read it straight without any form of, you know what I say? Yeah, inferiority.